The soft hum of fluorescent lights flickers in the sterile corner office, casting a pallid glow over the polished mahogany desk. The only sound is the rhythmic tapping of fingers on the keyboard, punctuated by the occasional beep of incoming emails. The narrator stares blankly at the spreadsheet on the screen: revenue reports, quarterly projections, and stock market trends. Every column is filled with numbers that scream success, but none of it feels real. A buzz from the phone breaks the monotony. The message reads, "We're celebrating at the restaurant tomorrow. Dad says it's a big milestone for the family. You should come." The words sting, cutting through the silence of the office. Family. The one thing the narrator has distanced themselves from in pursuit of Wall Street glory. Their father's voice echoes in their mind. The family business will always be here, but opportunities like this won't wait. The decision weighs heavy, like a stone lodged deep in their chest. On one hand, there's the corporate empire they've built, a life of luxury, prestige, and financial security. On the other, there's the pull of family and the restaurant that was once a dream. But is it too late to return to something more meaningful? The phone buzzes again. Another message. The pull of the unknown beckons. At 28, the narrator is the embodiment of success. Senior vice president at one of the world's most prestigious investment banks, they command a corner office on the 42nd floor overlooking the vast skyline of Manhattan. Every morning, they walk through the revolving doors of the building, tailored suit, crisp, briefcase in hand, surrounded by a team that defers to their expertise. The paychecks are staggering, the accolades plentiful. They're respected, admired, the youngest in the firm's history to reach their position. On paper, they have it all. The high-rise apartment in Tribeca, the sports car parked in the garage, the exclusive invites to galas and fundraisers. Their life is a well-oiled machine of corporate success, a life most would envy. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, the narrator feels a growing emptiness, a sense of detachment from the world they've built. The excitement of financial reports and market fluctuations feels distant, mechanical, more like a game than a passion. It's the family dinners that amplify the tension. Their father's booming voice always cuts through the conversations, louder than the clinking of plates. "You've got all this potential. Why waste it on spreadsheets and numbers? The real work, the real legacy, is at the restaurant. Your mother and I built this empire from nothing. You were meant to take it further, not sit in some boardroom." The words sting every time. The guilt gnaws at the narrator. How could they abandon the family business? How could they walk away from the empire that's grown from one small location to 12 thriving restaurants? Yet, every day spent in the boardroom only amplifies the frustration. They know they've succeeded in the corporate world, but in the eyes of their family, it's never enough. The family dinners are always the same worn tablecloth, the same overcooked pasta, the same tired small talk. But what never changes is the weight of expectation. Their father, proud and resolute, always casts the same shadow over every conversation, his words laced with a mixture of pride and frustration. "We've built this from the ground up. Your mother and I worked day and night, and now it's your turn. You were meant to take over, not sit in some air-conditioned office pushing paper. This is where real men make their mark." To the outside world, the family restaurant empire is an achievement. 12 bustling locations spread across the city, each serving the same well-received menu of mass-produced, standardized dishes. The dream their father built, however, feels suffocating to the narrator. The food, once crafted with love and care, has now become a mere product, the soul of the family business lost to the relentless drive for profitability. The chain's identity has been diluted over the years, and now it's just another name in the crowded market. The mass-produced nature of it all sits uneasily with the narrator, who craves something authentic, something that resonates with their core values. In moments of reflection, the contrast between their corporate life and the family business becomes clearer. In the sterile confines of the boardroom, they control millions, executing calculated decisions without hesitation. But in the quiet corners of their mind, they wonder, what if they could apply that same precision to something they truly care about? The cold, impersonal spreadsheets of Wall Street start to feel more distant compared to the warmth of food, passion, and the pursuit of authenticity. But the pressure from their father, constantly reminding them of the family's legacy, feels like a trap. The question haunts them: can they break free from the expectations that have defined their life? It was late on a Thursday evening when the text arrived. The blue glow of the phone illuminated the darkened office as the narrator's thumb swiped the screen, revealing a photo. Their father, beaming with pride, stood alongside their younger brother in front of a gleaming new restaurant. The sign above them read, Luciano's 13th location, in bold, garish letters. It was a moment of triumph, yet it felt like a heavy chain around the narrator's chest. The text that accompanied the photo was simple but loaded. "We've done it again. Time to come home and help with the next one. You're needed here, son." The words burned as the narrator stared at the screen, a sharp ache spreading through their chest. The years of relentless work at the bank, the late nights, the sacrificed weekends, the friendships left to wither, had all been in vain, it seemed. Their father was proud, but the pride was always tied to the family business, to his dream, not theirs. And yet, in their father's eyes, there was still an expectation, an unspoken demand that they return to the fold to help them push the restaurant empire even further. Frustration built to a boiling point. The polished glass and chrome of the corporate world, the endless meetings, and the soul-crushing chase for profits, none of it mattered anymore. The longing for something real, something they could truly care about, pulsed in their veins like a fire. In a moment of clarity, the narrator pushed away from the desk, grabbed a blank sheet of paper, and began drafting their resignation letter. Each word felt like a weight lifting off their shoulders, but even as they wrote, the question loomed. What would happen next? Would they be able to follow through? Would they regret this bold decision? Or was this the beginning of something new? The consequences, both personal and professional, were unknown, but for the first time in years, they felt ready to face them. The next morning, the narrator walks into their boss's office, the resignation letter clutched tightly in their hand. The sleek glass walls of the office feel suffocating as they sit down across from their boss, who greets them with a smile. But that smile falters the moment the narrator speaks. "I'm leaving," they say, voice steady. "I'm starting a food truck." For a moment, there's silence. The boss blinks, then chuckles nervously, assuming it's some kind of joke. But when the narrator doesn't smile, the laughter fades. "A food truck? Are you serious?" The boss leans forward, hands clasped on the desk, his face tightening in disbelief. "You've worked so hard to get where you are. We're talking about a senior position at one of the most prestigious investment firms in the world. You have a future here, a future that comes with a lot more money, a lot more opportunities. This is madness." The narrator doesn't flinch, though their heart races. I'm not leaving for the money, I'm leaving for something real. They stand up, placing the resignation letter on the desk. Thank you for the opportunity, but this isn't what I want anymore. The boss sighs, shaking his head. I can't believe you'd throw all this away. The phone rings, its tone sharp in the stillness. It's their father. The narrator picks up, and immediately their father's voice erupts from the other end. Are you out of your mind? A food truck after everything we've built? What about the family? What about the legacy? His words tumble out in a rapid stream of anger. You're throwing away real success for some pipe dream. This is foolish. The narrator listens, their grip tightening on the phone. As their father's voice rises in fury, something shifts. They take a deep breath, steadying themselves. This isn't about the family business, the narrator says, voice calm but resolute. It's about creating something that means something to me. I can't spend my life in a boardroom, not when I've always wanted to create, to make something authentic. I've thought about this. This is my decision. There's a long silence on the other end. Then their father speaks, his tone cold, resigned. You'll regret this. The words sting, but the narrator's resolve hardens. They know the pressure from both the corporate world and their family is only going to increase. But for the first time in years, they feel like they're making the right choice. The path ahead is uncertain, but the weight of doubt lifts with every passing second. The decision had been made. The food truck was now a reality, at least in the physical sense. With the savings they had managed to scrape together, the narrator purchased an aging food truck from an ad they found online. It wasn't glamorous by any means. The truck was weathered, worn, and in desperate need of a makeover, but it was theirs. Now the real work began. The process of customizing the truck was grueling. They spent days working with mechanics to upgrade the engine, trying to get the kitchen area to function in a tiny space. The permits were a maze of bureaucracy, each form more complicated than the last. They spent hours on the phone with suppliers, haggling over prices for ingredients and equipment that would fill the truck. Everything took longer than expected. Nothing ever seemed easy. The first day of business came, and the narrator was ready, or so they thought. The morning was slow, and by midday, the truck was still parked on a busy street with little more than a handful of customers, mostly curious passers-by who didn't stay long. The few dollars they made barely covered the cost of the food, let alone the overhead. By the end of the day, they felt defeated, their enthusiasm slipping through their fingers like sand. But they didn't give up. The following morning, they woke before sunrise to prepare the ingredients from scratch, chopping vegetables, marinating meats, and perfecting each dish. The hours on their feet seemed endless. By the third week, the reality of the food truck life was beginning to take its toll. Long, exhausting days followed by little sleep, and moments of doubt creeping in. Still, something began to shift. Slowly but surely, the truck started to draw in a regular crowd. A few loyal customers returned, praising the authenticity of the food. Word of mouth spread. They found themselves experimenting with new recipes, tweaking the menu based on what people loved, and each small victory, the first time they sold out of their signature dish, the moment a local food critic gave them a nod of approval, felt like a spark of validation. The grind was real, and it was exhausting, but there was something undeniably satisfying about seeing people enjoy what they had created. The truck was more than just a business now. It was a reflection of their own passion, their desire to build something meaningful, not just profitable. Yet, the question still lingered. Will this be enough? The doubts still loomed. Would the truck succeed in the long run? Would their leap of faith pay off? Or would they face failure, leaving behind the corporate world they had once been so entrenched in? It came from out of nowhere. A food critic, a well-known local figure with a sharp eye for hidden gems, stumbled upon the food truck one chilly afternoon. After sampling a dish, they spent the next few hours chatting with the narrator about the flavors, the ingredients, the passion behind every plate. By evening, a glowing review appeared online, an eloquent piece that praised the authenticity, the creativity, and the soulfulness of the food. The review went viral. Within hours, the food truck's social media exploded, and the once quiet street corner was suddenly flooded with new customers. Lines stretched down the block, and people were willing to wait for hours to try the food. The narrator watched in disbelief as their little dream began to take on a life of its own. What started as a humble operation with a handful of regulars now had people traveling from all over the city just to get a taste. It wasn't just the food anymore, it was the experience, the sense that they were part of something real and authentic. Word of mouth spread like wildfire, and the truck's social media pages buzzed with messages of support and excitement. As the days passed, the narrator found themselves overwhelmed by the rapid growth. The truck was no longer just a part of their life, it was a full-fledged business. But more importantly, it was a symbol of everything they had been searching for. A creation that came from their heart, something built on passion and honesty, not on spreadsheets and profit margins. Late one evening, as they wiped down the counters, the weight of it all settled in. They weren't just building a business anymore, they were living the life they had dreamed of, the life they had almost abandoned for the hollow promises of corporate success. And for the first time in years, they felt truly free. But even as success seemed to knock on the door, a question lingered in the back of their mind. Would this be enough to sustain them? Or would new challenges threaten everything they'd worked so hard to build? As the food truck flourished, the world outside the narrator's small business began to unravel. Whispers reached their ears, rumors about the family restaurant empire that had once been a symbol of success. The once thriving chain was now struggling. The perfect facade of polished kitchens and well-dressed waitstaff was beginning to crack. Customers were complaining about the food, service was slipping, and worst of all, there were murmurs of financial instability. The narrator's father, once a proud patriarch, was no longer the confident figure he had once been. Calls from their mother were laden with concern. "Your father doesn't want to admit it, but things aren't going well," she said, her voice tight with worry. The restaurants that had once seemed invincible now stood on shaky ground. The narrator could feel a strange mix of vindication and guilt. They had left the sinking ship, but at what cost to their family? Could they just watch it all collapse? With the skills honed during years in the corporate world, the narrator saw an opportunity to dig deeper. They began reviewing the financials of the family business from afar, using their old connections in finance. What they discovered was worse than they had imagined. Mass expansion had overburdened the business with debt. Quality had deteriorated, and profits had shrunk with each new location. The family's dream was slowly choking under its own weight. It was clear. If anyone could save the business, it would be the narrator. The very skills they had developed on Wall Street were the key to untangling the mess. But could they return to the world they had fought so hard to leave behind? Could they rebuild their family's empire while still protecting the new life they had fought so hard to create? The suspense hung in the air like a cloud of uncertainty. Would the narrator return to save the family business, or would they leave it to fall, securing their own future in the food truck world? The choice was theirs, but it was no longer as simple as it once seemed. The phone call came late one evening, a simple message. "We need to talk." It was from their brother, who had been working tirelessly in the family business. The urgency in his voice left little room for doubt. The restaurant empire was crumbling faster than anyone had expected. The meeting was set in the dimly lit kitchen of the family's original restaurant, now eerily quiet after hours. The smell of garlic and olive oil lingered in the air, and the once vibrant atmosphere of the bustling eatery felt ghostly. Their brother, exhausted and defeated, leaned against the counter, hands clasped tightly. "Things are bad," he said, his voice cracking. "Dad doesn't want to admit it, but we're drowning. We're in over our heads with debt. If we don't change something soon, we'll lose it all." The narrator listened carefully, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. They had built something new, something real. But the family business, the legacy their father had worked so hard to create, was on the brink of collapse. After a long silence, the narrator spoke up. "I think I can help," they said, finally. "But it's not going to be the way Dad wants. We have to scale back, focus on quality, and—" They hesitated for a moment. "We have to adapt. The food truck model. I've built something authentic, something people care about. We can take that model and bring it into the family restaurants, create something unique again, instead of just chasing growth for the sake of it." Their brother stared at them, a mix of hope and skepticism in his eyes. "You really think this will work?" The tension in the air was palpable. The narrator stood at a crossroads. Could they embrace their own success, their own vision, or was this the moment to step back into the family's fight and rebuild from within? They looked around, the weight of their own food truck dreams, now thriving, pulling at their heartstrings. But the family, this family, was still part of them. The clock was ticking. They had to decide, save the family business or build their own legacy on their terms. The choice felt monumental, and in the silence of that kitchen, the future seemed to hang by a thread. The decision was made. The narrator took the leap, combining the lessons learned from the food truck with the family's struggling restaurant empire. They introduced the same focus on quality, authenticity, and customer experience that had made the food truck a hit. The family business, once drowning in debt and stagnation, began to turn around as the new model gained traction. Slowly, locations that had once been on the brink of closure were revitalized, attracting loyal customers eager for something real, something that spoke to the soul of the food. Simultaneously, the narrator's food truck empire continued to thrive. The initial concept of authenticity had resonated with so many that it expanded faster than they had ever imagined. The food trucks ran smoothly on autopilot with a trusted team in place. The original food truck, the heart of it all, was now one of many in a growing fleet. Looking back, the narrator reflected on the path they had taken, one filled with risks, doubts, and sacrifice, but the journey had been worth it. They had built something meaningful, something that went beyond the corporate rat race or their father's vision. Success, they realized, was never just about profits or numbers. It was about creating something that truly mattered to them and to those they served. In the end, they had found balance. Both the family business and their own venture thrived, and the narrator had learned that true success lies in building something authentic, something that lasts.